Hi there.
So we are all here. We're going to go ahead and get started.
Let's go.
My name's Arnold San Miguel, and I'm the Regional Affairs Officer for Southern California Association of Governments. I cover Western Riverside County for SCAG, and I cover Riverside County. And just a little bit about myself. I used to cover actually Imperial County and Sandag in Mexico for SCAG before we opened the Imperial County office. And you had the Imperial County tour a couple days ago with David Salgado. So I used to be out there. And during that time, I fell in love with the Salton Sea, which is shrinking, but my love still grows for that place down there. So, but I was born and raised here in San Bernardino County, Colton. I went to all local schools, went to UC Riverside, was studying to be an accounting clerk. I was going to retire at the County of San Bernardino. Took this class, Introduction to Regional Planning, my only A at UCR. And, went to the professor was a PhD at UCLA, and he said, hey, you should go to planning school. So I, after working at the Institute for Social Justice, I called him up and said, hey, I'm going to go to planning school. Will you write me a letter? He wrote me a letter. I went to school there, and I took this class on law, and I learned about SCAG, and I said, I want to work there. Graduated, well, I walked on a Thursday, went to work on a Monday, and I never left. So it's been really good, and I'm really enjoying it. And Jan Harnick is going to be moderating for us today, and she's second VP at SCAG. She's the first chair at RCTC, and thanks, Jan, for doing this for us. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. And I serve on the council at Palm Desert. And if I were to give a summary of my life, and I will, to kind of reflect what Arnold's summary, I just say I'm from Pacoima, and now I'm in Palm Desert. And there was lots in between. So welcome, everybody. And this will be a great day, I think, for all of us. And we'll all learn a lot. We'll have an opportunity for questions and answers. And we have a great president right now at SCAG. That's Rex Richardson. He has tremendous vision, and he has set goals that reflect that vision. And right now he's going to start by just learning as much as he can so he can achieve all those goals. So go, Rex.
Right. I would say, I don't know if it's my turn to speak or not, but
yes, it is.
This is my it's my second tour. The first one was Imperial County, where we learned about Salton Sea and some of those other things. Interesting fact on Riverside County. I'm you know, even though I was born in Illinois, Belleville, Illinois, my story started in Riverside County, where my father was stationed at the Air Force Base out there, March Air Force Base. And my mother, she's from Alabama, but she came out to California for her senior year at Riverside Poly High School. And they met at a McDonald's. And then they got married, and she went into the, she became an Air Force wife, and I was born on Scott Air Force Base in Belleville, Illinois, but it all started right here in Riverside County. So I've got some history with the Riverside County, so I'm looking forward to the tour today.
Okay, and from that, let's jump in and get as much information as we can. So we'll start with the County of Riverside, and please introduce yourselves and tell us all about Riverside County.
Well, first of all, President Richardson, thank you for inviting Riverside County to be part of this discussion today. We look forward to providing this overview of some of the key priorities that we're facing in Riverside County. And it's funny that you mentioned March Air Reserve Base, because our situation with COVID-19 started back at the end of January, when we welcomed home the first group of American citizens back from Wuhan, China. Landed at March Air Reserve Base. We were given about 12 hours to prepare for their arrival, but I was very proud of how our team welcomed those American citizens back into the country, took care of them, provided them with food and clothes and shelter, and I think really took good care of them. So started, and we've been on quite the journey ever since, and the journey continues. So with me today, we have our Chief Operating Officer, Lisa Brandel. Maybe Lisa can wave real quick just so you can see who she is. We have our Assistant CEO, Transportation and Land Management Agency Director, Juan Perez here. And then we also have our Public Health Director, Kim Sarwatari. and they are the subject matter experts. So I'm going to make just some brief introductory comments and turn the bulk of the presentation over to them, and then we'll be prepared to have a good discussion. And I can see that Supervisor Spiegel just joined us, so welcome, Supervisor. It's nice to have you on the Zoom call as well. What we want to share with you today is, in fact, our preparation and response to the coronavirus situation. It has consumed us very much over the last 8 months, and we're very pleased to present that effort, and Kim Saratari will talk about that. She'll also talk about the broader indirect public health impacts that we've experienced as a county. And then you'll also hear about even broader impacts as we're dealing with the ongoing racial and social inequities that we're dealing with across our societies. And then you'll hear finally from Juan Perez about some of the economic impacts we're facing as a county and our efforts to promote economic recovery through this period. And then Juan will also talk about the population growth we've experienced as a county over the last 3 decades and what we're doing to prepare for that continued growth. So with that introduction, I will turn it over to our Public Health Director, Kim Saratari, and she can move us through the preparation and response efforts. So Kim, it's all yours.
Thank you, George. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, President Richardson. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. We always love talking about the work that's going on in Riverside County. So I'll talk about our COVID response to start. So if we can go to the next slide, please. And next slide, please. Okay, so Riverside County, we actually have the second highest number of cases and deaths in the state of California. According to this slide was pulled a few days ago to get ready for this presentation, but as of yesterday, we're up to 54,735 cases and 1,085 deaths. And if you look at the breakdown, most of our cases are in the older population, but in the last 2 months or so, we have seen an increase in our younger population, and we attribute that to their desire to go out and be with friends and in gatherings and kind of that intermingling that does occur. Right. Our cases are split about half and half by gender, although we do see a little bit higher of males that die from the disease than females. They're about 54% of our deaths. If we look at the racial ethnic disparities, our Latinx population is impacted by COVID-19 disproportionately compared to their percent of the population. So right. They represent about 51 or 52% of our cases, and they're about 47% of our population. Among African Americans, they are very close. They are about 6% of our population, and their proportion of our deaths range from about 5.2 to 6.1. So they're right on the brink and certainly being impacted by deaths from COVID.
Now, in terms of your total cases, what's your rate per 100,000 people?
Our rate per 100,000 people right now is about 7.5. Okay. That's our rate. The state adjusted upwards in some of their metrics, but that's based on data. It's about 7.5% or 7.5 per 100,000.
Okay, thanks.
Next slide, please. So while we certainly are very involved in monitoring and finding cases of COVID and looking at the morbidity and mortality attributable to COVID-19, we also recognize that health is comprised of many more things than just the disease process. And the measures that are being taken to interrupt disease transmission may have other effects that are unintended consequences of some of these actions. And so we have spent considerable amount of time looking at the indirect health impacts. And so this is just a very abbreviated snapshot. So when we look at things like food insecurity, in actually the slide should say 2018, it was 10% in 2018 and 16% is what we're projecting our food insecurity rate to be for 2020. So it's increasing considerably. We also are seeing that with the amount of assistance that's being required by our food pantries and people that are seeking assistance from our food pantries. Those numbers are increasing dramatically. Similarly, if we look at our CalFresh recipients, those numbers are up 22% so far in 2020. Drug overdoses, we are seeing about a 16% increase in overall drug overdoses. And when we look at the impacts by age of drug overdoses, we are particularly concerned because we are seeing increases in the 15 to 24-year-old range. So in 2019, in all of 2019, we had 47 deaths by drug overdose in the 15 to 24-year-old range. And so far in 2020, just through May, because that was our most complete death certificate range, we already have had 32 deaths in the 15 to 24-year-old age group. And so we're very concerned about what that might be signaling. Also concerned because the overdoses in that age group are attributable to fentanyl in most cases. And so we are seeing a rise in fentanyl as an issue among our drug using population. Similarly, when we look at Riverside University Health System, includes our medical center, our community health clinics, our behavioral health program, and our public health program. So we are one integrated care system. And behavioral health, when we look at their data for 2020, we are seeing a 16% increase in people that are seeking either behavioral health services or substance use treatment services. So more people are seeking those services. We also have seen about a 38% decrease in people that are canceling appointments or not showing up for their appointments. So not only is there a greater need, but people I would say are more serious about getting help when they are reaching out and they're keeping those appointments. One of the issues that we look at very closely is homelessness. And so when we look at rent insecurity, so people who are not sure that they will be able to make their rent payment next month, we have about 39% of our population that is in that position. And then we have about a 15% unemployment rate currently, as compared to about 4% in 2019. And we look at, I believe Juan's going to get into more detail later about what those sectors are that have been most impacted. But certainly it is those sectors that have the lower paying jobs and jobs where people are not able to take time off and have sick leave and those types of benefits available to them. So if we look at the overall picture of both the direct and the indirect health impacts from COVID-19, it is quite substantial across our communities. Next slide, please. This is an infographic that explains some of the services that we're trying to provide or we are providing to our residents in Riverside County. And there are a lot of things here. I won't touch on everything, but I will point out a few things. One of the programs that we implemented was a mask giveaway. And so the county purchased 10 million masks, and we partnered with community-based organizations, places of worship, city government, all kinds of different food banks, all different entities to distribute these masks to the general public. And we were able to successfully distribute 10 million masks to the public in less than 30 days. So that was a huge push, and it was around wearing a mask if you're going to be around other people that are not in your family, social distancing, and staying home as much as you can. Some of the other programs, I mentioned food insecurity. So if you look on the second line to the right, the county has provided $4.1 million in support to our food banks and our pantries and our food shelters, again, because of the increased need by our residents for support, for being able to provide food to their families. I also wanted to mention our student laptop program. So the county has dedicated about $11 million to purchase student laptops, and that's being done in conjunction with our Office of Education. We know by looking at our data that if we look at families that make over $150,000 a year, about 64% of them have regular, stable access to laptops, computers, tablets, something where they can engage in distance learning. And have relatively stable internet connections. On the other end of that spectrum, though, if we look at families that make less than $35,000 a year, only just over a quarter of those families have stable access to laptops, computers, tablets, and internet where they can engage in distance learning. So we're really trying to bridge that divide and make the technology available to those families who don't have it, so that we don't widen the education gap that already exists among communities. Next slide, please. We also have been working very hard to support our critical workers. And so one of the ways we've done that is providing PPE to our healthcare workers and to our first responder partners. So we've provided over 3.5 million instances of PPE to that workforce. We also have been very cognizant of the fact that our essential workers, healthcare workers, first responders need to be able to come to work. And in order to do that, they have to have childcare for their kids who are not in school. And so the county has supported childcare programs at the rate of about $5 million to make sure that those kids are taken care of while their parents are working and providing the services that our community so desperately needs. And I also want to highlight a very important program. It's called our SOS teams, or our skilled nursing outreach and support teams. And so these are teams comprised of medical providers from physicians, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, paramedics that are going out to our skilled nursing facilities to train them on how to use PPE, on how to cohort patients that are sick, really helping to prop them up because they're such a critical piece of our healthcare system infrastructure. And if we're not able to keep them running and keep staff there, which was a big challenge that we had, the staff were afraid because they didn't feel like they were adequately prepared to care for COVID patients. So we stepped in and are providing this service to our skilled nursing facilities so that their staff feel comfortable and know how to deal with COVID positive patients that are needing care within their facilities. And then the last one that I'll touch on here is quarantine support for farm workers. So we know that our farm working population is disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. Their working conditions, their living conditions in many cases don't allow for social distancing. And there are also not benefits in place so that they can stay home if they are sick. So the county has allocated $1 million to support the farm workers in our communities, so that if they are sick or have been exposed to a sick individual, we can actually put them in quarantine and then pay them a stipend for being in quarantine so that they're not going to miss out on wages that they desperately need to support their families. Next slide, please. And the last thing I want to just quickly go over today is our community action plan. So this is really a plan that was developed with many different partners in the county and the public. And really what the goal of our community action plan was, it was intended to get our community on board with getting our numbers down, getting our case rates down, our testing positivity rate down, and having an impact, having a control and an impact over our destiny, and getting us to the point where we could look at reopening additional businesses. So we had a campaign kickoff where we talked about wearing masks, social distancing, staying home if you need to, washing your hands, all of those important measures that will disrupt disease transmission. And we've asked the community to take a pledge. And so through our partnerships with community-based organizations, through our Masks Are Medicine, which was the 10 million mask giveaway that I mentioned earlier, when people got masks or sought specific services, we asked them to sign a pledge that they were on board with wearing masks, with the social distancing, washing hands, all of those things. And so we have well over 1,000 people that have signed up online, but then many thousands who have submitted and signed actual pieces of paper committing to working together to lower the spread of COVID-19 in our community. We also have hosted a number of virtual roundtables with subject matter experts from not only the county, but the healthcare system, community-based organizations, and others that have talked on various topics like mental health, data, what the data mean and what they don't mean, COVID-19 disease. So things where the community has an opportunity to watch, to learn, to ask questions, and interact with subject matter experts. A couple of other really exciting pieces of this was, or is, our Health Ambassador program. So we've partnered with a community-based organization called Reach Out, and they are overseeing this program where we are asking people to take pictures, paint, draw, write poetry, and talk about how the pandemic has impacted their lives. And so they're submitting this. It's a competition of sorts. And so our winners are going to be chosen by a panel of nonprofits. And then we are going to actually purchase advertisement time or space and show the winners to our communities. So really an opportunity to elevate what people in the community are feeling and how they've been impacted. And already I had the opportunity to see a couple of the entries, and they're just so heartfelt and so real. It's just really encouraging to see people coming and submitting their artwork so that they can really showcase how they've been impacted. We're also doing a social media challenge, so asking our residents to submit a 30-second video highlighting the simple steps of masks, social distancing, hand washing, staying at home if you can. And so highlighting in a 30-second video, again, submitting them to a nonprofit panel, and then the winners are going to be showcased on air through airtime that the county is going to be purchasing. So really the goal of our community action plan was to launch a behavior change campaign and asking people to change behavior in 30 days. We know the challenges with this. If we look at things like getting people to wear helmets, getting people to wear seatbelts, getting people to stop smoking, that was many, many years in the making. And so we are compacting that into 30 days. And of course it extends beyond the 30 days, but really making that hardcore press. And we actually have seen our numbers come down. We are still in the purple tier in terms of having widespread community transmission, but our positivity rate was up as high as about 17 or 18%. It's now down to 7.8%. So we are making progress. We're going to continue to work on this. We're going to continue to outreach to our hard to reach or most at-risk populations. We have contracts in place with community-based organizations using promotoras, trusted community members to do outreach and help promote the importance of contact tracing and all the different programs that the county has so that we can really try to have an impact and stop disease transmission. So with that, I am going to turn it over. Next slide, please. And we are going to have, I believe, Lisa talk about the economic impacts in the Inland Empire.
So quickly, Kim.
Yes.
So a lot of that outreach, was that paid for with CARES Act funding?
Yes, we are using CARES Act funding to contract with the community-based organizations and do that outreach.
Great, just curious.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Kim. Good afternoon, everyone. Next slide, please. As Kim mentioned, there's a lot of different impacts from COVID, not just health and public health. There's a real economic impact as it is across the country in our county. And so the biggest job losses in the sectors of our county are in leisure and hospitality, retail trade, health and education, professional and business services, and other services. Now, the job losses are below average annual salary, but it has an economic impact across our county because a lot of these folks are finding themselves strapped for making their rental payments. And in Riverside County, as across the whole state, average home prices and rents continue to rise even in the face of this pandemic. And more than 50% of our renting households are rent burdened, and which is also common in our state. And so they have to dedicate 30% or more of their income on rent. And so we have, our board has allocated some of the portions of the CARES Act funding that we've received to help renters with a rental relief program of about $30 million. The county as a whole received about $488 million direct allocation of CARES Act funding based on our population. And so with that funding, we have worked towards ameliorating a little bit of the economic impact. There's no way that we can solve everyone's issues, but with some of the CARES Act allocation, we're able to assist those that are impacted. For example, with the rental relief program, which is 30 million. We have a nonprofit assistance of 5 million. We have a youth community core, which is 2 million, which are 6 or 12-week internships for youth 18 to 25. And then pathways to employment, which are 8-week or 12-week job placements for those that are out of work and need assistance. And so Juan will talk about the other programs for our small businesses. We also allocated about 46.5 million for small businesses to help them meet the impacts of COVID. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Juan.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon, President Richardson. Thanks again for your time today to join us. And I want to say hello to Comey. I had a chance to work with Comey a lot. Hey, Comey, back in the day at Caltrans. It's great to see him here in this role in SCAG as well. So I'm going to touch a little bit on the economic recovery efforts and also kind of segue into growth and long-term, what that means for the county. Next slide, please. So as Lisa mentioned, the county has been active through the use of CARES Act dollars in allocating about 46 million to our business community. So that's in the form of $10,000 grants each to our businesses. We are nearing our capacity in that. The demand has been enormous, as you can imagine. And so we're continuing to see that need grow, especially as we're dealing with prolonged effects of closures to some of our business sectors. Nonprofits are a huge part of our support network here in Riverside County. So we have actively funded them as well through use of CARES Act dollars. And one thing we're really proud of is our campaign of providing facial coverings, masks. The county has issued in total about 2 million to our businesses, about another 10 million directly to the public. So we've have over 12 million face coverings that have been issued in Riverside County, which if you think about a population of 2.5 million, there is no one in Riverside County that does not have a face covering, or 4 or 5 of them. So we're very proud of that effort and outreach we've done. One of the things that we've been very concerned, Lisa did a good job of highlighting the challenges to our business community, and a lot of it falls on our small businesses, as you know, the sole proprietors, the folks that run a restaurant or a barbershop or what have you. They've really struggled the most, and they were many of them were day to day just because of the nature of the business prior to that. So the county has done what we can to try to help them along, and that includes a business ambassador program to have folks that can go out there and help our businesses that want to do the right thing and want to operate safely to be able to do that in accordance with state guidance. So we're proud of that effort. Next slide, please. So recognizing the task ahead, our Board of Supervisors established an economic recovery task force, and that has 20 members from the business community, our chambers of commerce, our nonprofits. We also have labor at the table. We're very happy to have labor representation, our tourism bureau, just a wide range of business interests to help the board plan for the recovery of Riverside County. And a lot of it in the short term has focused on reopening, but in the longer term, we know this economic recovery will unfortunately take quite some time to get back to where we were. So we're going to continue to work with our business community. They're very engaged in trying to promote good public health because they know that good public health is good for business. So we're very proud of that partnership that we've been able to forge with them to help be our own public health ambassadors in their own way on the ground level with businesses. Next slide, please. So I want to segue into growth and housing and the future of the county. And Riverside County has been the fastest growing county in California now for a couple of decades. And we're projected over the next 10, 20 years or so to pass up Orange County, and then eventually a little bit further down the line pass up San Diego County to be right behind LA County is the most populous county in the whole state. And we pride ourselves on trying to maintain a high quality of life for our new communities and our new folks joining us. And the county overall has been, I think, willing to embrace growth in a way that's planned, that's balanced, provides for open space and the environment and transportation. Our challenge, though, and it's a challenge many agencies are dealing with across the broad SCAG spectrum, are the expectations of growth from the state. As we're just completing our cycle of the regional housing needs assessment, if we can segue on to the next slide, please. Riverside County, and this speaks to just the unincorporated area. Riverside County as a whole, including our 28 cities, has received housing allocation of somewhere around 160,000 units, which is a very, very large number. You can see for the unincorporated area itself, and our unincorporated area is spread out over 7,300 square miles and over 80 different communities where we do not have the urbanism, if you will. We don't have the freeway access. We don't have the transit access that other parts of Southern California have to be able to accommodate and be able to provide for growth. So our challenge in dealing with growth into the future is not a lack of desire to grow. County has shown that we have that. It's lack of ability to grow because of our limitations on infrastructure. Again, you're dealing with very spread out areas. It is hard to service new communities. It is hard to provide the backbone infrastructure. There are really difficult costs, even when the land has been rezoned, as we did over our last cycle with RENA. We rezoned over 1,000 acres to a very, very high density, but the market has just not been there to be able to actually deliver on that growth. So I know there are conversations going on within SCAG as to, given the state targets and what next steps SCAG may take, whether it's appeals or challenges to the state, what have you. I think it is important to recognize, and I know you do, that all of the SCAG area, I think, deals with these challenges, and in particular for us in the unincorporated area. We really encourage you to take a very active role in continuing to advocate with the state in whatever means possible to make sure that we end up with realistic housing targets, because it's one thing to put it on paper, but it really does not lead to progress on the ground unless we also get the requisite state funding that comes with that for infrastructure, for transportation, for water and sewer, and all those other things. So this is continuing to be a challenge. We're going to be exploring how we handle the Riverside County numbers. And we certainly want to continue to have a conversation with SCAG. We're considering our next steps. If maybe considering the appeal process, we want to continue to have this conversation with you. But again, our challenge is not lack of desire to provide housing; it's lack of ability to do that in a financial way that the market can support. So that's an ongoing conversation. I know that you'll be hearing from RCTC, I believe, and others later that will talk about transportation infrastructure as a key part of that. So with that, next slide, I'm gonna turn it back over to Lisa to talk about some listening sessions that the county's embarking on.
Thanks, Juan. So with this unprecedented year that we've all experienced, there's been a lot of discussion regarding racial and social justice issues, system inequities. And so next slide, please. So our board has requested to schedule some listening sessions with members of the community. And the plan is to listen to the various needs of our population. As Juan mentioned, we have over 7,000 square miles, and we have cities, we have unincorporated areas, and they all have different needs, and they've all been impacted in one way or another. And our board wants to hear what they have to say. So likely we will have more than one session at different days, different times of the days, so that we can have as much community feedback as possible on the issues that are important to them, so that our board can formulate strategic decisions on budget priorities, service needs, and demands from our community, and how to assist and see how we can address these issues that our communities are facing. And so we're looking to have those throughout the fall, and provide feedback to the board and to our county staff, so that we can make informed decisions. Additionally, our board wants to form a community task force. And so the thinking is that, you know, hearing back from the community, seeing what kind of makeup of the task force that they would want to have, and formulate how that will go about in the future, and engage with the community even more than we do already. And so those listening sessions would also be in person, you know, with social distancing requirements, but then also have phone-in options, so that people have as many opportunities as possible to communicate to our board.
Right.
So we're looking forward to having those scheduled very soon. So
just a note, the City of Long Beach, we just concluded our process. It started with you know, listening sessions that were large town hall, but also a focus group. From there, a group of stakeholders formed, and we conducted convening, kind of worked through what we learned in the listening process and compared to what the data tells us about the reality of our city across systems. And from there, we put a plan together that had 107 recommendations around things from restoring public trust in the police department to economic equity, health equity, a whole host of issues, really 4 categories. And that plan was adopted by the city council, and we just adopted our budget this week, where about 40-50 of those 107 items are being funded to be implemented in the first year. And so I would suggest, as you're starting this process, learn, you know, look at what Long Beach has done. SCAG's doing a little bit of this as well. With the we have a plan called Framework. It's my 1-year work plan, the Framework for Recovering, Imagining a Resilient Region, and it follows those same sort of structure: listen, convene, catalyze. So we can send all that stuff over to you so you can have it.
thank you, President Richardson. But you know what? We have it. We've reviewed it.
Oh,
yeah. We're using that as a possible model that our board can
the Long Beach
implement.
model?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great.
And so we are working, one of our ideas is to work with a partnership with our University of California, Riverside School of Public Policy. Fantastic. To attend everyone, every session, and provide an objective feedback to the board, and maybe identify some common themes that would serve as a basis for focus group meetings, future town halls. Our boards have municipal councils. They have community councils depending on our district. And so there's different avenues we can engage with the public, but this would be more of a broad-based. And so definitely the Long Beach model was very impressive. And we saw that you worked with a local university to provide these recommendations.
We did. It was difficult, but we certainly learned a lot through this process. So if have you reached out to Teresa Chandler in our city who helped manage the process?
I don't think so. Maybe Kim can answer. She's the one that shared your model with us.
Okay. Well, I'd love to make the introduction.
Oh, great. Thank you.
I'd love to make that introduction. I mean, some of the work that came out of it was we established an Office of Equity to look at these things years ago, but it hadn't been funded or elevated. And so since we had it and we started building these capacities, we use this opportunity within the budget to take that, elevate the office out of the health department into the city manager's office and and place a deputy city manager over implementation of the plan. And so we just adopted our budget, goes into effect October 1st that's when we really begin the implementation. So now would be a good time to kind of learn, because we learned a lot. It was these were hard conversations, very emotional. We had to treat it with a lot of dignity and respect, even though, there's a lot of emotion, a lot of tension, but that's what people expect of their government now. We need to sort of change and be comfortable with some level of disruption, and really sort of lean into this concept of equity, where we have to propose alternative models for doing the things we've done for generations, models that just include more people and have more support. And that's really what it's about. In my opinion, it's about presenting a model that's more resilient because it has more public support.
And I think President Richardson's right. I mean, there's going to be a lot of uncomfortable conversations, a lot of disruption, and that's where we're going to get the best results. So we need, Lisa, was there more about the listening sessions? I think you're going to get a lot from President Richardson, certainly.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm done on this. I'm done on
no,
this. Point well taken.
No, the conversation will continue. I can see that. So I wonder, does the CEO have any more he wants to share about Riverside, or shall we move to our next segment?
I think you heard from our team what we're focused on right now, and so we're prepared to transition to RCTC unless you have any further questions of us.
No, I mean, this is very, very impressive, the work that you're doing in Riverside County. Particularly, I'm really impressed with the communication around your CARES Act, your COVID-19 programs. Looks very comprehensive. It's rooted in community. I think we can all across the region kind of stand up and look at what you've stood up as a model. So thanks for that. And I hope I can get a hand on those slides at some point.
And we get them just weekly to all the leadership, and anyone who'd like to jump on the phone call, they provide that. So it's been great information for everyone. So now actually we're going to move to Sunline. And we have Lauren Skyver, who is the CEO and General Manager. And take it, Lauren.
First, thank you so much, President Richardson, and a big thanks
Sure.
to the leadership of SCAG and the staff for allowing us to be here today. With me, I have Rudy LaFleur, who is our Chief Project and Performance Consultant, and Brittany Sal, who is our Chief of Public Affairs and Clerk of the Board. And we're going to just run through a little short presentation about what we're working on, both on service and on our alternative fuels program, which has been a very important part of how Sunline has moved commercialization of zero emission technologies. And so we can, hey Jen, thank you. So we can go to the next slide. I mean, we all know where the valley is, but it's important to note that Sunline does serve all 9 cities and parts of the unincorporated Riverside County. We have about 1,120 square miles of service, and this is completely important in the fact that we have 80 buses to do so. Next slide. This is just a little bit about our system. We are considered a small transit agency, but I will tell you we have the reputation of being the Reno of transit. We're the biggest little transit agency probably in the world for some of the work that we've been doing. And we covet that name and continue to work on ways to not just transform our service, but to transform how clean energy is being produced and used, not just in Riverside County, but across the world. We do have 14 routes. We are a regional service, and so we do go into Riverside, and we are working on a line that will go into San Bernardino to the transfer center there. We don't run any solid fuel on our property and haven't for more than 25 years. We run CNG and hydrogen. We also have all battery electric vehicles. You'll know through this presentation, we are technology agnostic. We're about proving all kinds of clean transportation to ensure it can be available to the marketplace, not just in transit buses, but for heavy duty and the light duty sector. Next slide. And please stop me because I can tend to just get on a roll talking. So if you have a question, just stop me.
I'm deeply engaged. I'm not shy about jumping in. Go for it.
Okay. So the first thing we want to talk to you about is the transformation that we're embarking on for our transit system. Next slide.
On that bus, is that the fuel cell at the top of the bus?
Go back.
It
Yeah,
says
the fuel
hydrogen
cell.
fuel.
Yeah,
Is
the
that on
fuel
the
cell
top of that
sits at the
bus?
top of the bus. And some of our buses have a raised roof for CNG tanks, but the fuel cell buses operate that same area for the fuel cell. And I'll talk a little bit about the different technologies that we run. But we have been using and working on, next slide, Jen. We've been working, you see from our backgrounds, on refueled. Since we are a hydrogen producer, refueled is something we do on a daily basis with our vehicles, and we are also refueling our entire transportation network. So we have thought long and hard about the fact that we've been running some of the same routes for the past 20 years, which do not serve communities, do not serve the East Valley, where we have a lack of transportation options, density, and infrastructure. And so 3 years ago, we started working on revamping and redesigning our entire network. Next slide. So there's a lot of moving parts to that, but one of the major ones is consolidating our routes. As you know, out here with the conditions and climate, making bus transfers not only is difficult because of our climate and terrain, but it's also just difficult to use a bus system. The more transfers you have to make, the more risk there is that you miss a bus and that your trip is derailed in time. And so we're going to consolidate the entire network to get more one-seat rides to our riders, and then speed that network up by taking some unproductive areas and consolidating them down into one route. We're also going to be running a commuter link, as I mentioned, out to San Bernardino. This is in partnership with UCR, and we have a lot of good attributes built into this service. We've bought some new buses that are over the road to be more comfortable for passengers, and we know we have an audience that needs this service right away, with college students that need to access the San Bernardino campus for classes. But this will also be an enhancement to the public, since now more connections can be made at the San Bernardino station than there were at Riverside. One of the most exciting parts of our new redesign is we're launching our own rideshare service. We regulate the taxis here in the Valley, and so the use of Uber and Lyft are problematic for us, and we really want to help the taxi industry here in our Valley thrive. And so we will be launching our own rideshare program. We already have much of that planning done. We'll be using 4 pilot areas, one in the East Valley, where we really want to concentrate on these mobile, more frequent, and more flexible services for the residents out there. And so more to come about that as we begin to launch it, but we're very excited about this rideshare program. As you know, many areas of the Coachella Valley and Riverside, unincorporated Riverside County, don't have the density for a 40-foot bus. It's unproductive, and it doesn't suit the customer needs with the time it takes to catch the bus and get where you need to go. So we believe some of these more flexible services will really be enhancements to the mobility options for our community. And then the last thing we're working on is an express line. We're very unique as a transit agency. About 70% of our ridership comes from one line, and that's the 111, which, as you know, goes all through the valley, the Highway 111 corridor. And so we really want to make some enhancements to that line so that we can move people along to jobs, leisure, and school quicker. And so we're working on this 111X, which would be an express line along that corridor. Next slide. So for the COVID-19 response, I mean, obviously everyone on the planet's been affected, and every sector has been affected, and transit has been affected deeply. I did want to give you some of the highlights of what we did. We were one of the first transit agencies in California to go to rear door boarding. And we did that for many reasons. We did it to protect our customers and our operators, but we also did it to give a financial break to riders who were already so consumed with so many worries that paying a fare could be something that prevented them from the mobility that they needed. So we moved to a Sunday service right away so that we could manage the network. We run ghost bus on those lines so that we can manage social distancing, and rear door boarding has been in place since March.
But what does rear door boarding have to do with them paying their fares? Is that you collect the fares at the front?
Yes. So there's no longer access to the fare box. So they come in through the rear door and ride for free since March.
Interesting. How does that impact your budget?
It does impact the budget, but we are moving towards, well, CARES Act funding has helped to supplant the revenue that we would lose from collecting fares. But we do need to work on collecting fares again. I mean, it is part of how transit operates. And so to respond to that, we've started employee health screening. We have infrared cameras that all staff goes through, and any contractors that come onto our property, to screen for illness. And then we have driver barriers which have been installed on about 12% of our fixed route buses. We are actively moving that, and considerably more on our paratransit. But once we get these driver barriers, then we can go back to using the fare box, where there's a separation between the passenger and the driver at the fare box, and collect fares again. We also have looked at our budget. Obviously, everyone must look at their budget, and we have been successful in the past of saving money on our annual budget, but we really wanted to take a deep dive on our capital projects and the plans that we had to ensure that we are looking into the future, not just of this first year of COVID-19 and the impacts, but multiple years beyond, which we know will impact all of us in the amount of funding available for not just service, but for enhancements in capital projects. And then the development of this response plan, refueled as part of that. We had looked at a much slower launch of refuel, but the pandemic has actually given us the opportunity to put some of these into place much quicker. If you try to dismantle your service when you're in the middle of an active service, it's much more difficult than taking a Sunday service and slowly bringing it back up with this new plan in place. So that's one of the optimistic things that have come about with COVID-19. Next slide. And so optimism is a word that we use a lot, because one of the things we know from our employees to our riders, that if people are dealing with a whole lot, not just in their work life, but in their personal life. And so we talk a lot about optimism at Sunline with our employees and with our riders. And one of the things that we've done to respond to the racial and social injustices that we see across the country is develop a diversity council within our organization. This is going to branch out to all levels of the organization, and it will also start with our union employees. And so this won't be something that management participates in and then drives down to the rest of the organization. It will be made up of all types of positions within our organization. And we actually hope to at some point bring in rider comment about how diversity and inclusion can be a part of the way we plan services. I mean, we already have federal standards, but we all know that's not enough. Just to conform to a regulation isn't what we need to be doing today. We need to be looking at more, and as you stated, having these harder conversations about the way the public feels about our services as well. And this might sound hokey, but bringing joy to the workplace has been something we've been working on for the last month, and this is about simple things. It's about your favorite food on your Zoom background. It's about jokes. It's small things that have no cost associated, but we've really been focusing on joy at the workplace, so that we can keep our employees engaged and they have a safe space to laugh in, as long as we're still getting the work done. We're doing extensive rider and employee outreach. We just outfitted one of our old retired paratransit vehicles to be an outreach vehicle. That's one of Brittany's projects. And that's so we can go out into the community and station ourselves there, not to just randomly catch people who may be going by, but actually position ourselves in a spot that we know the community frequents, so that we can talk to them about our services, talk to them about what we need to do to improve and how we can better reach communities that we serve. And then, as I stated, the refueled initiatives are something that we want to build optimism with our riders and with our employees. Next slide. Next slide, please. I'll talk a little bit about our alternative fuels. You may or may not know about us. We were the first transit agency to produce hydrogen. We produced 84 kilograms 20 years ago. We moved in 2006 to a SMR, which is steam methane reformer with biogas, so CNG biogas. And we made about 250 kilograms a day using that. And so during this time of producing fuel, we were also commercializing and helped to commercialize fuel cell technology for heavy duty. And this is not just what's happened in buses, it's also now in dredge trucks, and some of the Nikola and other over-the-road manufacturers are looking at fuel cell to be the new zero emission technology used. We know that all battery electric will be a big part of light duty vehicles, light duty trucks, but class 6 to class 8 trucks will need more power density than all batteries can provide. And so we know hydrogen will be part of that future. Next slide. This is why we've chosen fuel cell, and I won't go through all of these, but it's really about range. All battery electric bus gets about 150 miles of range a day on a charge, which is certainly not enough to do a bus route for a day. Our fuel cell buses get between 300 and 350 miles per fill, which is right where our CNG buses are. And actually some of our fuel cell buses are extending mileage beyond what our CNG can do. And so that's one of the key reasons. The second key reason is, and a fleet operator like I am, just like private and city fleets, the replacement for an all battery electric on a larger vehicle is about 2 to 1. So when you start thinking of the cost of 2 vehicles for every one you have now to do the same job, the cost implications are enormous. Next slide. And next slide. So we have a board policy that has created this success. It was passed back in 1993, so it's very old. It's never been changed. It's actually never been retyped in computer form, so it's still a typewriter policy, but it actually drives the organization to stay around this zero emission focus, and it's why we continue to work towards new technologies and what's available. Next slide. So this is just a little bit about our fleet. We're kind of like I told you earlier, technology agnostic. Typically, if you look at a bus fleet, you're going to say all the same bus out there on the yard. That is not the way our fleet looks. We have multiple OEMs. Eldorado Nationals are built in Riverside, so that's an important partner to us. New Flyer Bus is the other fuel cell. We also run 4 all battery BYD buses. Next slide. I wanted to tell you a little bit about our production. So I told you at one point we were producing about 250 kilograms today. We are now producing 900 kilograms per day at the station that you see here on the right. It was funded by a CARB grant, 8.7 million. It has been up and running for several months, and we are filling buses with it. The key about this station is something we're going to talk about for the future, that we see a clean power source for the valley. Next slide. ICT is important to all transit operators in California. The Innovative Clean Transit Rule requires us all to move to zero emission technologies by 2040. Sunline was the first to file its plan on the small system scale. We had 3 years to file it. We filed it in July when the large system deadline took place. And we have a very detailed plan on how we're going to do it and how we're going to fund it, which is really the most important component. Next slide. We've won some of these grants that we put out recently. So even during COVID-19, when it's nothing but bad news, Sunline won 10 more fuel cell vehicles. And so that only drives our program quicker. If you win the buses, you've got to have the fueling infrastructure. And so we're driving on the next projects to create more hydrogen. The really key point about Sunline and fuel is we've been selling CNG for about 20 years. And made at some points in time almost $3 million in revenue from fuel cells. And so one of the things we keep driving is these projects that give us the capacity to sell fuel to augment the state or federal funding we get and to create more resiliency in our budget. Next slide. So the project we have for the future, I'm just going to share a little bit about it with you. I mean, we're really excited about this project to be the first ever solar to microgrid to hydrogen project. Next slide. And we're working on, we have funding through LC Top to buy property across the street from us, and it has 4 phases to the project. As I told you, we're using electrolyzer now, so we're using grid power, which makes our hydrogen not only more expensive, but not green, depending on the source of the power in the grid. It's really important to us not just to minimize tailpipe emissions, but also to minimize the creation of our source fuel carbon footprint. And so this project we're driving is about getting clean electricity and clean hydrogen, not just for our fleet, but for sale to others in both public and private fleets in the region. Next slide. The first phase is to put 2.4 acres of solar farm. You can see that in that blue area, and also a switchgear that would move that electricity to the internal areas of our property where our electrolyzer sits. Next slide. The next phase is battery. So we put battery storage in so that we could store that solar power and run our electrolyzer. We make we make hydrogen during the day and then dispense it at night. So we want to be able to keep that clean solar power somewhere for use, and then reduce our reliance on any grid power at all. Next slide. We have a public station. This is our public station. You can see a truck in there buying CNG. We would like to upgrade the capacity of that station and the compression. Light duty vehicles are 700 bar. This dispenser that we have already is 350. So we'd like to, so we could possibly fuel Ben's car when he's out in the area. We'd like to make that station 700 bar. What's really important as well is Nicola, Peterbilt, and those that are building Class 8 trucks to conform to the ACT rule of California are looking at 700 bar as being the compression that they will use for the energy density they need for those long hauls. This would become our light duty station, and we would be able to sell both CNG, hydrogen at 350 bar, and hydrogen at 700 bar. Next slide. And then the last phase would be a truck plaza on the area not used by the solar farm. As you know, we're right off the 10. We have 2 interchanges right at our property. Trucks could on and off in a quick manner, which is really important in logistics for fueling. We would sell clean electricity and clean hydrogen at this station, and then support the California State's ACT rule, in which over the road and all Class 2 to Class 8 trucks will have to be zero. It will also support our cities here. We look at this as being a redundant and resilient way to create power for the Coachella Valley and potentially for customers outside of the valley. But it seems like this is an idea was born in a trailer before we even had a fixed building about 6 years ago. And who would have thought that the world and California was really going to be a leader about all transportation being zero emission, and this plan fitting right into that. Next slide. The last thing we have to talk about, Rudy's going to go over really quickly, and then if you have any questions for us, we're ready to answer. Rudy?
Great, thank you, Lauren, and thank you, President Richardson. We had started, as Lauren mentioned, 2016. We put in for some grants because we saw, based on our military backgrounds and associations, that when you deploy new systems, you need to have training appropriate to maintain those systems. That's something that was not being funded because the FDA and some other agencies are commercial product oriented, but we are developing new systems. And so we came up and we have applied for money from the FTA for both the training and for the facilities. Next slide. And so one of the things that we made sure of is we included the industry in two workshops. We identified the training that we received from the first workshop. In the second workshop, we validated that training, and we conducted last year some beta testing on the training to make sure it was something that was needed by the industry. And also, there was a board developed from the OEMs to make sure that we had buy-in from industry. And so the Center of Excellence training was funded by the FTA for the first $300,000. And then Sunline put in some of its own revenue to make sure that it supplemented the amounts from the FTA to make sure that we invested in training to develop a policy and a vision. The master plan that we've already had in place, establish relationships with utility providers, and help other agencies develop those internal champions that you need to run a zero emissions program. And one of the things that we call it technician training is making sure that the technicians and the operators understand how to use this new technology and maximize its benefits. Next slide. And so the mission and vision statements are to provide training and support to successful acquisition, deployment, operation, and maintenance of zero emission vehicles. And Sunline's been a leader, and so it's taking that experience and learning and putting it into some training materials to help. It will be an incremental workforce improvement program where we can take the old mechanics and turn them into technicians and have them apply those refined skills to zero emission technologies, both battery electric and hydrogen electric vehicles. Next slide. This is the advisory board that I mentioned earlier. It was a brainchild of Lawrence that funders wanted to have some type of certification or some type of assurance that the training met a certain standard. And so this board has already been developed. It's already been formulated. Among other programs that Sunline is leading, like the Zebra program, this board was developed with a governing structure. And so right now we're reviewing training materials and coming out with a survey of the industry to make sure that our training, one, is validated, and if there's new training opportunities, that those be addressed. Next slide.
So I just want to end, thank you, Rudy. This is the trade school of the future. And, you know, when I was a kid, everyone, you know, if you went to trade school, it was HVAC or plumbing. This is going to be the new trade where you understand how to maintain a fuel cell, you understand electricity, you understand how electric drives work for both light and heavy duty. And so we're excited that this is going to be in the Coachella Valley. And thank you so much for the opportunity to tell you about what's happening at Sunline.
Okay, thank you so much, both Rudy and Lauren. And it was like Lauren put herself on fast forward. So we got a lot done, and it's great to see Sunline just making sure that they remain relevant in transportation and in education. Thank you for that. So in an interest of time, we're just going to move on. RCTC.
I want to just acknowledge the presentation just quickly.
Okay, go.
So, I was just surprised and impressed by the amount of focus on technology. So I'd heard of Sunline. I know you folks are a leader, but I mean the way you just just blow right through it like it's like regular stuff. Most people can't figure this out. How do you hold on to staff? I'm pretty sure everybody's calling you and trying to steal Lauren and Rudy to other agencies. I know in transit that happens a lot. It happens in Long Beach, at least Long Beach Transit. Our folks, you know. Our last deputy, I think she just went to the Denver's transit agency.
Deborah Johnson, good friend. Yeah.
Yeah, she just took over Denver, it looks like.
You know, I think that the joy, bringing joy to the workplace, I tell people, you know, yeah, and you know, we have people that know more about a hydrogen molecule than a PhD at UC Irvine, and we've pitted them against the PhDs at UC Irvine. So I think that that's part of the excitement of working there. You don't have to have a PhD to be involved in something that is really technical and really groundbreaking. And I think that's why people don't leave. They're so excited about what we're doing. Our whole agency is so excited, and people really care about the environment. Our riders do, and so do our employees. And so, I mean, I just started school for environmental science because I'm inspired. I mean, maybe I can work with the Salton Sea someday. I don't know, but maybe we can find a way that hydrogen will help the Salton Sea. I think all those connections can be made, but we have a really excited workforce, and they are amazing.
That's great. Okay, so
President Richardson, don't even
sorry,
think about it.
Don't
even think about it.
One more thing.
Okay.
Jan, I didn't acknowledge. So we have some colleagues here, and we just blew right past that, but I just wanted to acknowledge. I know Ben Benoit, like, you know, we've served on MSRC together. I'm glad to see you here. I know Supervisor Spiegel is here. Thank you for taking time to join us. Jan, we know obviously you're here, but I also see Clint Lorimore, our first vice president here, and I see Comey here. So I just wanted to acknowledge everybody that's here, my colleagues. I do see you, and I thank you for participating today. All right, Jan, I'm done.
Okay, no, I was just saying, don't even think about trying to take the CEO from Sunline to fill in the blank in Long Beach. So,
no promises.
Okay, so we'll move to RCTC, which half of the people that you just mentioned serve on RCTC, and Ben, of course, is the chair, and we've got our executive director, Ann Mayer, so take it, Ann.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And President Richardson, welcome to Riverside County. So,
all right.
It's great that we have
Riverside from my dining room.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I'm sure you've been able to hear so far already, there's a lot of really exciting things going on in Riverside County, and certainly from a transportation perspective, there is an awful lot going on in our arena as well. And I think what's really fascinating about it, and one of the reasons why I'm so grateful that you're taking this opportunity to learn more about Riverside County, is many of the issues that we are currently facing in Riverside County, whether it's related to mobility or housing affordability, land use decisions, environmental protections, concerns about equity, protection of our disadvantaged communities, and absolutely what I know you understand is the conversation about freight. And the fact that everything that rolls in and out of the ports of LA and Long Beach rolls through Riverside County and the Inland Empire, either on the roadway or on tracks, on the rail.
Absolutely.
So I think there's so much that we have in common, even though Long Beach is a bit of a ways from Riverside County. I think we've got a great deal in common. I'm grateful to have so many of the RCTC commissioners joining today. Not only are they very active locally, but also at SCAG as well. And I see that the camera just came on for my pal Kome here. And I just wanted to let you know, President Richardson, that the RCTC staff views SCAG as a real partner. I think that in many of the policy discussions we've been having for the past couple of years that can be really consequential for our region. Those conversations are important to have with SCAG because this is about the region. It's not just about our individual communities. It's not just about Riverside County. It's about the region as a whole. And we're kind of linked at the arms. Our arms are linked here.
Right.
So what we would like to do is I would like to turn it over to John Standiford, our Deputy Executive Director, to give you just a brief presentation and a tour of some of the key things going on at Riverside County, and then we can open it up to some additional conversation on the policy front, which is where I think we're going to have some some real conversations need to take place over the next year or so. So John, take it away.
Thank you, Ann, and thank you for being here, President Richardson. At the beginning of the meeting, I appreciated you talking about your ties to Riverside. I have some ties to Long Beach. I spent 3 summers working on an oil field job in the port of Long Beach.
Yeah.
Back when the Long Beach Naval Shipyard was actually a naval shipyard. It was hard manual labor, and it motivated me to do well in school. So in many ways, I'm here today because of that job. So,
Is that the old Wilmington oil field or the Long Beach oil field?
it was Long Beach Oil Development. I guess it's Topco now. Yeah.
Is it Topco or is it CRC? I think it might be.
I think it was Topco.
Okay.
So at least what it is now. It was Long Beach Oil Development back then. So.
Right.
So why don't we go ahead and get started with the presentation. And if you could skip to 2 slides to the slide that starts with Measure A. Because we've done a lot of welcoming remarks and acknowledgements of everybody. I think what we want to get started with is talking about our main funding source. And in many ways, this is the guide to a lot of what we do in Riverside County in terms of transportation, and that's our voter-approved sales tax program, Measure A. Of course, in Los Angeles County, there are multiple voter-approved measures. We have 1 half-cent sales tax, and it is the primary funding source for transportation in Riverside County. We're also a pass-through agency of federal and state funding. We work very closely with our transit operators such as Sunline, and that was a great presentation we just heard. But Measure A is the majority funding source for us. It's governed by an expenditure plan, and we kind of look at that as the plan that we need to accomplish because it's our pact with the voters. And that same expenditure plan created transportation uniform mitigation fees. We call it the TUMF. I have to make sure I spell it out for people who aren't local to here, but essentially this started in the Coachella Valley, but it requires single family housing and housing to pay their fair share. In fact, all new development pays this, but their share for development of local arterial roads. It's a pay-as-you-go type of thing, and it provides a local component that joins with our Measure A program. And the other thing is our measure's different in that we have separate areas that keep the money that is generated within those areas. What's really interesting today is we have a representative from Palm Desert, from Wildomar, and from Eastvale. Those communities are not very close to each other. In fact, one of them is even separated by another area code. But they all have a lot in common. I think they represent the future and the promise of Riverside County, offering various housing options. They're investing in things like active transportation and the health of their residents. There's commercial opportunities, and there's a lot of community pride. But as Juan and Lisa pointed out earlier, there's a lot of space to connect all of this together, and that's one of our goals at RCTC. So let's move on to the next slide and detail some of the Measure A projects that we have going on. If we can go to the next slide. Thank you. Thanks, perfect. We fund quite a bit with our Measure A program, and there's been a lot about the impact of COVID, and we're proud to say that our projects, of which we have many on our highways and regional areas such as freeway interchanges, our essential workers in bringing infrastructure are continuing to work. We've had to make some adjustments for social distancing and safety, but we are keeping people at work. And in a few minutes, you'll get to see a video of a pretty exciting example of how that's taken place. Measure A also funds alternatives such as commuter rail and public transit. And this list here is of the projects in Western Riverside County. And then we go to the next slide, we can move east. We go all the way to the Arizona border. And of course, in between there is the beautiful Coachella Valley, where funding goes to a lot of regional arterial roads as well as state highways such as Highway 111. But a big chunk of Measure A goes back to our local cities for their local projects and improvements, much like is the case in other counties in Southern California. In the Coachella Valley, we also fund part of a small part of funding for paratransit and public transit service in the Coachella Valley. And there's a third area, the Palo Verde Valley, which is essentially Blythe and the unincorporated communities near Blythe. And most of that's just done to keep their street and road network moving. So let's go to the next slide, please. These are some accomplishments. You see a lot of numbers there in terms of routes. Pretty much every freeway and major state route in Riverside County has been improved in some way thanks to our half-cent sales tax programs. We are building an interchange right now at Railroad Canyon Road in Lake Elsinore and a brand new one in Paris. We're funding arterial projects. We have 3 separate Metrolink lines that come into Riverside County. Other than Los Angeles, we're the only ones that have that, and we have 9 Metrolink stations that we own and operate. Ann talked about freight, and grade separations are a big part of mitigating the impact of freight in our communities. And we've been fortunate to partner with a number of communities such as Riverside and the county to build some really needed railroad grade separations that have improved safety and mobility. So let's go to the next slide. I was excited to hear about Riverside County's listening sessions in terms of planning. We did a lot of outreach in trying to develop a traffic relief plan earlier this year. We were looking to possibly go to the ballot for another half-cent sales tax program this November. And of course, the COVID crisis kind of caused us to rethink and change our plans and think about that for maybe another time. But in order to do that, the commission adopted a traffic relief plan. And this is a pretty comprehensive plan that includes funding for transit, for active transportation, for habitat and other mitigation, as well as the basics that we need in terms of highway development and street and road improvements. Even with that plan, if we could fund it, just like every other community here in Southern California, we have some major funding shortfalls that we worry about. And it's that challenge that we're trying to deal with as we look forward into the future. Let's move to the next slide, please. We're going to quickly go over 4 current critical projects, and we chose these 4. We didn't want to take up all of your time today, but we wanted to focus on 4 that are tied to important regional issues that SCAG is dealing with. It kind of follows along to what Ann just said about the need for discussions and the major regional issues and how we are addressing them. So let's go to the next slide. I know that express lanes is a big part of the future of development in Southern California. SCAG has been pretty innovative and active in trying to work with the county transportation agencies regarding express lanes and toll facilities as a way to mitigate rush hour traffic and also provide incentives for transit and carpool use. The very first express lanes toll facility we saw in Southern California, at least for express lanes, was in Orange County on the 91. And in many ways, the first thing a lot of people think about when it comes to Riverside and transportation is the 91 freeway. In many ways, that's the gateway into Riverside for many people. And every morning, there's about 280,000 vehicles that travel through that corridor. Many of them heading west in the morning and then coming back in the afternoon. And although the traffic kind of disappeared at the beginning of the COVID crisis, we are seeing that growth starting to come back, especially in peak hours. And we hope as the economy improves, we continue to see some economic activity. But we're currently in construction right now on express lanes on the I-15 from essentially Cojalco Road in Corona, close to the San Bernardino County line, but the State Route 60. That facility should open by the end of this year. And then we plan to connect those express lanes to the ones we have on the 91. But even after we spent more than $1 billion on investing in the 91, it's an ongoing investment that we have to continue nurturing and continuing to improve. And we have another construction project going on, ready to start in October. And we are seeking funding for yet another interchange at the 7191. But the success story for the 91 in many ways in the express lanes has been a lot of inter-county cooperation, as well as cooperation from the communities, and Corona really stands out here in terms of looking for innovative options. And there's a case where a lot of times you see our counties competing for funding, and we always do that, but we've developed a very effective relationship with Orange County because so much of this is tied to inter-county travel, people going to jobs or people using services on either side of the county line. Let's go to the next slide. The other thing we want to talk about a little bit is freight. We are building some truck lanes, and this is not a capacity project, but this is a safety project. If you've driven out to the Coachella Valley and taken the 60, you know what a windy road that can be, and you're often competing with trucks that either can't go as fast as you want to or are going too fast coming down the other direction. So we are building a truck lanes in each direction, acceleration lanes and deceleration lanes, about 4.5 miles. This is funded much by the recently approved SB1. So a lot of state funding going on here and a very complicated project. But as I mentioned, this is affecting trucks, and we do have a lot of truck issues and air quality issues in terms of freight. What we're going to do right now, though, is we're going to transition from this PowerPoint to a recently completed video on this 60 project. It's about 4 minutes long, and it's a really well done thing done by Rebuild SoCal, and talks about the labor investment and what's going on to connect Riverside County. If we can go ahead and play the video, hopefully the technology works there.
We started talking about the safety aspects of it with Caltrans, so we came up with a strategy that not only adding a truck climbing lane, but a truck descending lane, because that's where most of the accidents are. People from around this area call that stretch of the 60 the Badlands. I have no idea how it got its name.
The project consists of widening it to 3 lanes in each direction, plus a 12-foot shoulder on the outside and a 10-foot shoulder on the inside. Because of the grade, there's some major speed difference between the vehicles and the trucks, so that causes a lot of accidents. It's mostly a safety project, but it's also going to improve traffic flow.
There's going to be an addition of a truck climbing lane, so as you head eastbound, there are going to be 3 lanes for motorists to use. That far right lane will be for truck traffic. The second improvement is the addition of a right-hand shoulder. Prior to the addition of the shoulder, there was no right-hand shoulder for emergency vehicles to access the emergency and mitigate the scene.
So just this morning, we had a truck turn over on the westbound side of the freeway. The road is really narrow, so if you're not paying attention, you could lose control easily.
Not only did we have to build the project with all of the safety improvements on the roadway, we also had to make sure that we were doing it in the right way for such an environmentally sensitive area.
It's great to do something that's environmentally friendly, assist with the wildlife here.
We're constructing 2 very large culverts, approximately 20 feet by 20 feet wide, that will allow some of the larger animals to cross from one side of the corridor to the other. Because some of the larger animals, if they can't see light in a tunnel, they won't go in.
We have a lot of wildlife on both sides of the freeway. With this particular project, we're actually adding approximately 7 different wildlife crossings in addition to our 20 by 20 culverts. It's all part of the life cycle.
The automated GPS triangulates the signal from the satellites, uses that to calculate our location. The GPS helps the operating engineers who are operating the blade, the scraper, and the dozers to get within ½ an inch of the appropriate grade for freeway paving.
So I think the biggest sense of accomplishment for me will be the teamwork. The absolutely amazing work done by the men and women who are working in difficult circumstances and building this incredible project.
Show up, you better have a game plan, material, tools, everything there. And if you forget one little thing, it can really slow you down. Today it's supposed to be over 100 degrees again. You know, I respect all my crew and fellow workers out there that show up every day and give it their all and sacrifice themselves to help us all get the job done.
The importance of the union is extraordinary. It's done a lot for my life, given me a career, also taking care of my family. It's good for working people to have that kind of protection.
SB1 played a vital role in making sure this project got to construction. It made a real impact on our ability to get the project out the door and under construction.
Infrastructure is one of those things, if you don't stay on top of it and you get behind, it's really hard to get caught up.
We've been through a difficult time in our society, so it's nice to see people getting back to work.
There is absolutely no doubt that the improvements that are being made are going to save lives, and I think at the end of the day, that's what matters to the team the most.
It's really a great feeling to work on a project that's going to save lives.
President Richardson, we will send you the direct YouTube link so you can actually see the video and the sound sync. Trying to run a YouTube video on the Zoom might have been pushing the technology envelope a little too far.
It actually came through really well for me. It was a little, you know, a little out of sync, but that's okay. It was a great video. It was incredible.
Well, we're proud of it. We're glad we partnered with Rebuild SoCal to do that. We just have 2 last slides to go through, and we'd be happy to take any questions. If we can go to the next slide from here to the Mid-County Parkway slide, we will go ahead and wrap up. Ann touched on this a little bit, but we really have some major needs to match our transportation development with the need for more housing in Southern California. And Riverside, as Juan mentioned, Riverside County will soon be the second largest county in the state. So we need to continue to invest in highway development as well as in transit and other alternative areas. And one thing that we have worked carefully here in the county as part of our Riverside County integrated plan to set aside habitat and do an integrated plan, but also to invest in new transportation corridors. And we are looking, we're starting the very first part of this to build a 16-mile expressway from Paris to San Jacinto. The first part of this is an interchange at I-215, which isn't too far from the air base, as you mentioned. And we are looking forward to getting that started probably in a few weeks. So let's go to the next slide. Finally, I just want to touch on, we're a proud part of Metrolink and looking to expand regional rail connectivity. Obviously, COVID has made this a challenge, but it's a challenge that we think Metrolink is, and I see a typo there, I apologize, that Metrolink is definitely getting involved in and trying to act in a proactive way. We here in Riverside County expanded the service to Paris. And one day we are also looking to bring passenger rail service that would serve the Coachella Valley. We would like to bring Amtrak service, probably operated by the Lausanne Rail Corridor, to essentially connect west and east. We have the highway connections. Palm Springs has an excellent airport. The rail would be an excellent complement to all of that. And we are currently in the environmental program to do this. We want to work closely with the state on this. And finally, the last thing we really want to work with the state closely on is the new proposal by high-speed rail to move some freight rail out of the corridor between Anaheim and Los Angeles and build a rail yard in the Colton area, which is in San Bernardino County. And I'm sure when you tour San Bernardino County, they will provide you with a lot of information on this. But the construction of a facility like that in a disadvantaged area that has some significant environmental and air quality concerns is problematic. And I know that you had some communities in Long Beach who have dealt with BNSF regarding a rail yard not too long ago. I think we're going to see the same concerns brought up here. And then there's going to be the added truck traffic that affects areas near it. And that would include parts of Riverside County. So that environmental document is available for comments now, and we are going to be participating in that process. That concludes the formalized slides. Be happy to have any discussion or answer any questions.
Well, you know, I have to tell you, the video, I think the way that you're telling the story, and Ann, you did a great job in that video, by the way. But the way you're telling the story and explaining the way that investing in infrastructure, not only does it help achieve your transportation goals, but it actually transforms lives and helps provide economic opportunity for people. That's the way we have to explain this to the public. I think now that SCAG has moved past and finally adopted its Connect SoCal plan, we're moving into the same phase where we need to begin to now work as a region, all 6 counties, to advocate for federal stimulus. You know, we paid attention to HR 2 that didn't make it in this last congressional session, but we know in the new year there's going to be a significant focus on stimulus, transportation funding, and the way we see it, transportation, housing, broadband, all of these together are the foundation for the economic recovery. So the fact that you're already talking about it and sort of making the connections to the way you layer funding together, the SB2 funding and other things to make these projects happen, I think that's how we have to tell these stories. So I think it's great. Another thing that stood out to me was I didn't realize all the things you have to do to make sure the wildlife can cross over a freeway. I had no clue. I've seen those things before. I thought it was about drainage or water or something. I didn't know those were wildlife crossings. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it really is kind of fascinating, and that project has been a long time coming, and it's, you know, a pretty terrific thing to see it finally being implemented. And I hope what you also sense, not only from what you know about Riverside County, but also from the examples of some of the projects we showed, is that Riverside County is a very, very large county with significant diversity in mobility needs.
Certainly.
And so you can see, you know, in the western part of the county, we're employing, you know, pricing with an incredible toll network. We're almost at $2 billion for the toll network. Yet we still have areas where we are in relatively isolated, you know, the population is mostly animal population. Where we've got significant safety needs, we've got freight needs, and then as you continue to go out through the Coachella Valley, the needs out there are different as well. And so I think in the year ahead, where we'll be, you know, really advocating, or what we'll really be advocating for, is that policies cannot be implemented with a one-size-fits-all perspective, that Riverside County and the SCAG region is so incredibly diverse that we have to make sure that policies the state is implementing at this point does not, that those policies do not continue to disadvantage our own communities, who are very, very much in need of economic vitality, of, you know, increasing our job centers, and from the perspective of air quality. So we've, you know, got Chairman Benoit is on AQMD as well. We've got some real air quality issues here that need to be tackled, and transportation contributes to that. So there's a lot going on in Riverside County, and we're just thrilled to be working with SCAG, and we've been proud of that relationship in the past, and we'll continue to be proud of that, and put some real effort into working as a team.
That's great. One last thing I'll say, I think it's a great reminder just how capable Riverside County is at doing these major transportation projects, because they're going to be important as we figure out how we build out for the region access to high quality transit, and you know, how we move around. It has a direct correlation of where we build housing and how all this works. So we need Riverside to have the capacity that you have to think big and do these large projects. And I think that's at the regional council, we need to find better opportunities to highlight the importance of building out the infrastructure in Riverside County, and how that's important to the entire region and all of our outcomes in all the different counties, LA County, Orange County. Riverside is where we need to invest in the growth.
I like that.
Fantastic. Me too.
You know,
Great.
and RCTC also, and I know John alluded to it, went on their listening tour with Reboot My Commute, and listened to thousands of people talk about what needed to be done for transportation to make their commute better, just in all facets of their life. Got some great input.
Commute. Great branding. Great branding.
Really helped with the entire transportation plan, and it was really helpful.
Certainly. Great.
Okay, any other questions?
Well, if I could just chime in, I appreciate all the presentations, and one of the things that I think is undersold about Riverside and Inland Empire in general is the fact that there is a lot of transit going on. I think people tend to think of that part of the SCAG region as mostly dependent on the automobile, which I think most of the state is dependent on the automobile. But I think what you all have shown with this presentation is the innovation in providing options on mobility to the extent that we're building out the rest of the highway system, and understanding that our capacity for the future, as we look into the future, has to come from having mobility options, and transit is a big one in there. And I appreciate the innovation that we saw with Sunline and the fact that you all actually are leading the way on Metrolink as well. So I just really appreciate the presentations and the work you're doing. So thank you.
Okay, so great. So now you're going to hear about a whole another set of needs, and from Rebecca Zaragoza
Right.
with the Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. So it's kind of the forgotten part of Riverside County sometimes. So you won't forget about it anymore. Rebecca.
Yes, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. First, it's really great to meet you, President Richardson, and thank you so much to SCAG for the invitation and making space to hear about the Eastern Coachella Valley. If we could bring up the presentation, thank you so much. So again, my name is Rebecca Zaragoza. I'm a senior policy advocate with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability, and I'm based in the Eastern Coachella Valley. Today, I'll be talking a little bit about who we are as a nonprofit organization, what we do, and some of the environmental justice issues that we work on within the Eastern Coachella Valley. Next slide, please. So Leadership Council is a community-based nonprofit organization that tackles large social and environmental justice issues. Our mission is to work alongside disadvantaged communities to advocate for sound policy and eradicate injustice to ensure equal access to opportunity, regardless of wealth, race, income, or place. We work across the intersecting issues of affordable housing, land use, water and wastewater infrastructure, transportation access, air quality, and a number of other climate-related issues as well. As you can see here, we work across the San Joaquin and Eastern Coachella Valleys, but we have offices in Sacramento, which leads our statewide policy work, in Fresno, Bakersfield, and our local office is in the city of Indio. But within the Eastern Coachella Valley, we work primarily with the unincorporated communities of Thermal, Oasis, Mecca, and North Shore. Next slide, please. So just to provide a little bit of background in case some of you are not as familiar with the region, but the ECV is a rural and agricultural region with a population that's primarily consisted of folks of Latinx descent. Residents from the ECV tend to make up a lot of today's essential workforce within the entire Coachella Valley. Residents who also travel to the Imperial Valley for work as well. They work in the different industries from agriculture to the tourism industry, as well as the hospitality and restaurant industries as well. And as you can see here, and as I'm sure you all have heard this before, the Eastern Coachella Valley is very different from the rest of the Coachella Valley. On one hand, you have a very affluent and thriving region, while on the other, you have a region that's struggling to access some of the most basic resources and human necessities like access to safe drinking water, affordable housing, accessible transit, and overall clean air as well. Next slide, please. So one of the top issues that we work on with residents in the Eastern Coachella Valley is transportation. Some of the challenges that we face in the ECV include unpaved roads, low frequency and limited options with public transit, as well as a lack of active transportation infrastructure and other supporting infrastructure like bus shelters, sidewalks, and other infrastructure like that as well. On top of that, when it comes to planning and trying to implement projects to alleviate some of these issues that we're facing, we face even more barriers. And that's sometimes due to data gaps, a low population density that doesn't allow us to compete well for cap and trade programs, for example. There's also systemic eligibility exclusion of unincorporated communities, also related to a lot of these statewide programs that sometimes doesn't allow unincorporated communities to apply for those funds. And one of the biggest issues is that programs are already mostly designed to invest in communities that already have some foundation of basic infrastructure and resources like community centers, housing complexes, grocery stores or other types of community amenities, which disproportionately excludes rural communities and communities of color, for the reason being that they don't already have that historical investment in order to have those different types of community amenities for us to connect to transit or other resources like that. Next slide, please. And so despite a lot of these hardships, we've been able to lead several successful planning efforts for the Eastern Coachella Valley, both as, or mainly as a lead in community organizing and engagement. We partner with different stakeholders on different planning projects, and we work to ensure that all of these planning processes are transparent and that they include the voices of the community residents with which they're trying to serve. So one example of what we've done in the past is that from about 2017 to 2019, we worked on 2 mobility plans. One was for the communities of Thermal and Oasis, and another was for the communities of Mecca and North Shore. From the first plan, we were able to work with Riverside County and other partners to secure a $6.8 million grant from the Active Transportation Program to implement a top priority project identified by residents throughout the planning process. And so this was a very big achievement and a huge opportunity that's coming to the Eastern Coachella Valley. It's been a very long time since we've seen an investment of this size here. And so a really huge thank you to the residents, especially who helped work on this plan and helped push for the county to apply for this program as well. And another plan that we worked on with residents as well went on through all of last year, I believe. We worked on it with different stakeholders, including Riverside County, the Coachella Valley Association of Governments, as well as the City of Coachella. And that is the Eastern Coachella Valley's Action Plan for Climate Resilience. And compared to the other mobility plans that we worked on, this one is a lot more comprehensive and includes diverse project proposals ranging from affordable housing, parks, air monitoring systems, community centers, community gardens. It also includes a proposal for a micro-transit system that's more flexible and may be more adaptive to the needs of a rural community in terms of transit. And others other types of projects that would ensure a more transformative future for the Eastern Coachella Valley, while also making it more resilient and adaptive to climate change impacts. And I will mention that this plan was funded through the Transformative Climate Communities Program, which is a cap and trade program. And the Eastern Coachella Valley was actually the first rural community in the entire state to receive this planning grant from the TCC program. And so one thing I really want to highlight in this section is really the importance of building relationships and partnerships with the community. I know we've mentioned some of this already today and seen how other agencies are working with community residents, and it's really great to hear. But really building partnerships with residents allows for diverse collaboration and really ensures that we lead community-led processes to reflect the true needs of the community, and making sure that when we're thinking about implementing different projects or expanding our infrastructure, that those projects really address what residents in these communities really need to have a better quality of life. Next slide, please. And so moving on to some of our broader work around racial justice and climate justice, a lot of the conditions in the Eastern Coachella Valley, whether ranging from housing to transportation to the Salton Sea as well, have a significant relationship to climate change and the impacts of climate change. We know already that rural communities and communities of color are the most vulnerable to climate change impacts and are really the very frontline communities and the first ones to experience those impacts. And we have been seeing those impacts already throughout the Riverside County, the SCAG region, but as also within the Eastern Coachella Valley as well. And so one key thing to note here is that racial justice is a climate justice issue. For some, it can be two different things, but the more we continue to work in silos and separating these two topics from one another or from other topics like public safety, air quality, drinking water, for example, we cannot address one issue without discussing the other. And so that type of framework or system that we've been following for a long time is really what's been doing a lot more harm to the communities that we're meant to be helping. And again, I really want to emphasize that this is really a top priority issue that impacts primarily Black, Indigenous, and communities of color throughout our region. Next slide, please. And so in terms of economic development, it's really important to recognize a lot of the systemic and historical challenges that the community has been facing. These include poor land use decisions in unincorporated communities, a failure to prioritize community-led and desired development, also low-wage jobs, and what we know to be an extractive community that's very specific to the Eastern Coachella Valley as well, or within the entire Coachella Valley, and an overall underinvestment in communities of low income, but also communities of color. And so I know I've discussed a lot about the issues that we're facing, the challenges, the problems, especially problems that plague communities like the Eastern Coachella Valley. But I've also provided here some recommendations that we can achieve, especially if we work together and include all of the diverse agencies that have a stake in these issues, that these can really help transform environmental justice communities. And some of those include making sure that investment really supports upward financial mobility for the local community, supporting as a partnership a just transition to clean energy, and supporting our workforce development for a zero emission economy as well. Supporting investments that benefit community and that do no harm, and this is more of like a preventative measure as well. Supporting the strong implementation of SB 1000 in our general plans, implementing AFFH to allow families equal access to opportunity, schools, education, and employment as well. So those are just some of the things that we thought we'd mention today that can really target some of the issues that I mentioned and really start to think about what solutions we can bring to the communities and how we can work with residents in making sure that that happens. So with that, thank you so much for your time, and I'm here if you have any questions.
Well, thank you for this portion of the presentation. I've talked about this at the SCAG Regional Council that as we chart our recovery, we have to do so in a way that we're building an economy that works better for more people. And you know, through the work that we're doing at SCAG, we have to highlight examples like what you're doing in the East Coachella Valley to really show that making strategic investments in those areas and investing into climate resiliency and economic opportunity, that just expands the table. It just creates it's a rising tide lifts all ships sort of approach that establishes a new floor and a new standard for across all counties. We're starting a special committee on racial equity and social justice as it relates to planning and other things across the region to be a lens on our recovery. And I want to make sure that the East Coachella Valley work is highlighted as we begin that process, because something will come from this. There will be some document, some strategy that comes out of this, and I want to make sure it's in alignment with what's happening in East Coachella Valley. But I thought it was a very, I think your strategies are on point. We're an environmental justice community in Long Beach, particularly the area I represent along the 710 and the 91 freeways. So I recognize what it is you're doing, and it's great that you can point to the plans you've worked on that can really be a compass or a roadmap on how we, on how you make a difference there. So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca, so much, because this was something we all need to know about. And unfortunately, and we've talked about it at SCAG, how important it is to get over to the Eastern Coachella Valley and to Salton Sea and to see some issues that we're not aware of. And Anne, I saw you were going to say something. Excuse me.
Oh, thank you very much. I mentioned previously my concern about policies that are being implemented that don't recognize the diversity of our area. And I think Rebecca's presentation really highlights the consequences of one size fits all policy that is being imposed. She also mentioned that communities like those discussed in Eastern Coachella Valley can't compete for cap and trade funds, guidelines that are being written for transportation projects. Frankly, most of those filters are based on a more urban setting and on usually with more of a Bay Area tilt. And so you've got a lot of folks talking about road diets and active transportation and bike lanes and all sorts of improvements in a built environment. And it completely neglects the fact that we have communities in need of basic infrastructure just to get to the grocery store.
You put a road diet if it's a dirt road.
Correct. And so I think, what Rebecca has highlighted is really important. And I'm thrilled to hear the committee that you're establishing that can be looking at some of these issues with a racial justice and equity lens. And I would like to throw in that as new transportation related policies are being implemented at the state level, that you look at those policies as well, because it's been hard to communicate that we've got communities that need essential services. It's really difficult to have that resonate, even if you bring people out. A couple of years ago, there's a tour out in the Coachella Valley trying to demonstrate to folks who are from Sacramento exactly what the needs are in the Coachella Valley, and it didn't resonate. So thank you, Rebecca. You set the stage very well for the conversation that needs to be had. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions or thoughts before we hand it back to President Richardson to wrap us up for the day? Okay, it's all you, Rex.
Well, Jan, thanks for being such a great host. Supervisor Spiegel, Ben, thanks for sitting in with us, and Clint. I certainly appreciate all of you welcoming me virtually to your county. I've certainly learned a lot. You should be, I'm pretty sure you are very proud of the work that you're doing. I can see when I serve with folks like Ben and see his pride and the things that he's focused on with air quality and all these other things. So you got a lot to be proud of. I certainly have learned and have benefited from spending this time with you. I know that you have an incredibly diverse region. You are capable of doing some of the world's best work on transit and transportation infrastructure. I think we can learn from Riverside County. And I also think that we need to do a better job making sure that the region understands the role that Riverside plays as it relates to growth and the future of our economy, and how to make sure people who live in your in your growing community that continues to grow make sure that they can connect to the basic service, not only the basic services they need in their communities, but also connect to our regional economy through our transportation network. So I've certainly learned a lot. I thank you all for the time that you spent with me today, and I'll make sure that we take what we've learned today and integrate it into our work plan for the year.
Okay.
Great.
Well, thank you, everybody, and I think we got a whole lot of information in a little bit of time. So thank you, and we'll all see each other soon, I know. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.